Again. Hello and welcome to yet another session of Samyukta Poetry. And it is with a great deal of happiness and pride that I am inviting you to this session, which is the launch of Earth and Embers, South Asia in Verse, published by Speaking Tiger and edited by Rachel Bari, Ishmeet Kaur Chaudhry, and Shweta Garg. Though it was an inadvertent, misspeak on my part, I think that by now these editors have, kind of worked so closely with each other that they're pretty much interchangeable. So, and
Right.
they're very,
They're already married.
good-natured, so I don't think they'll mind. So,
Yes.
and while, before we go into the launch of the book, there is something that I would like to say about it. In my, invite on social media, I had called it a brave anthology. And I believe that it is, in fact, a brave anthology, as all of you will find out in the course of time. It is a brave anthology, brave in terms of the ambition that it presents, the spaces that it creates. It places, love alongside despair, passion alongside displacement and loss, and memory alongside ephemerality, and very importantly, experience alongside a number of debuts. So it creates a space for translation and helps amplify a staggering range of voices. And the three editors who we have on the screen, women who have been fired up with passion and purpose and who have moved this project forward and have refused to give up in the face of opposition and crisis. And they have been amply assisted by their editor, Mr. Prem Kumar, who I have found to be a very calm communicator, because I was one of the contributors to the book. So he's been sending us very calm messages. Okay, so let's celebrate the launch of this book. And I would like to say that, this is indeed a very apt time to launch this book also, because this earth is currently going up in flames. There is so much of uncertainty, there is so much of violence, and there is not enough opposition to it, not enough resistance to it. And somehow there is an attempt to normalize all that we're seeing around us, which just seems unfair, which just seems wrong. So, in the face of that, a book like this that comes out that talks about the existence of multiplicities, that honors civilizations that are thousands of years old, I think that that deserves to be celebrated. So, all those who have a copy of the book, please hold it up. Otherwise, you can just wave at the screen. Yeah. Yes. Let me just put everybody on screen. Yes. 1 second. Yeah, so this seems like a very coming together, a very synergized moment. So thank you very much. Yes, and now I would like to take the conversation over to our editors, and I would like to hear from them about the genesis of this book. So over to you, please.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Sonia, for those wonderful words. And we know, Ishmeet, Shweta, me, and of course, Prem, we know what we went through. But it was also a journey which helped us through, because so many of them stood with us, stood by us, for us, being very patient and kind. Now, that was just a preliminary 2 or 3 words, but I would consider, this a true privilege, and I would like to welcome you all to this online launch of Earth and Ember, South Asia in Verse. And this is a collection that gathers voices, textures, and emotional landscapes from across a region as volatile as we, see it today. And first and foremost, I would like to thank our publishers, Speaking Tiger, who have meticulously brought out this collection, this beautiful collection. And it is their professionalism, their promptness, and respect for the timelines which made it possible. The journey was smoother at the end of the times when we were quite dejected with the first publisher. And for this, we are deeply grateful. We are also very thankful, Sonia, to you. You are one of our contributors, and you're also the organizer of this evening's event, and along with Samyukta Poetry, and for taking this wonderful initiative. It's beautiful initiative of hosting the online launch. Your patience, Sonia, is commendable because we made a lot of minor changes here and there. You were very kind. You were very patient, agreeing to everything, and that's a great thing. Thank you so much. Now, this anthology, as you see, I'll take maybe 5 or 10 minutes to just talk to you something about the journey and then hand it over to Ishmeet and Shweta, who will do the rest. Okay. Now, this anthology, as you see, it's not just merely a book, it's a confluence. It's a journey that continues even now. And this began during the deeply traumatic period of COVID-19, and that is 2019. We all remember those days of isolation. It was literally isolation when social interaction was scarce. Yet we also recall how creatively we turned to digital spaces. Yeah, social media was a huge, what do you say, huge solace then. Yeah, today we can berate it, but then it meant something then. We wrote, we shared, because I still remember going through an ad which said that you write for 21 days continuously and we are going to publish it. Okay, I did it, but it was never published. That was a different thing. But then I did write, whether it was small pieces, whether it was poetry, or whether it was a short story. I did write. I still have the collection with me. But that kept me alive. And I'm sure that happened to most of you who have been writing. So we wrote and we shared, we connected in some way or the other. And it was during this time that the idea for this anthology was took root, right? And because each of us have encountered pandemic differently, but for many, creating art, or as Shweta famously says, making art became a way of enduring uncertainty and loss. And I'm sure that uncertainty and loss is something that all of us understood then, all of us understand now. So it's a very apt thing to say. Now, this collection is a result of a thoughtful and collaborative effort. Yeah, the idea germinated in me, all right, but then behind the germination was this enticing duo, talented, witty, committed, duo of Ishmeet and Shweta. Their faces came before me, when I was thinking of this, and I'm sure that I wouldn't have gone ahead with this if these two were not there. Yeah, much, much, much younger than me, and they are themselves volatile, burning with passion. So I thought, okay, let's bring them aboard, and they agreed. And of course, the entire collection that we had asked for some 8 to 10 poems from each contributor. They had sent it. And this was this chaos that was there in front, because right now the book is 364 pages, right? But then just imagine if it was 10 poems per contributor into 64, it would have been very unwieldy. And all this, out of all this chaos, an order was brought by poor Prem. I say poor Prem because I must have driven him nuts. Okay. So he has been very, very meticulous in bringing together everything without a word. Dr. Sonia, what you said is true. He is very calm. You cannot upset him in any way, right? So this book that you see today is a result of a thoughtful and very collaborative effort. And I would like to thank both of you, Ishmeet and Shweta, to make it very formal. Dr. Ishmeet Kaur Chaudhry and Dr. Shweta and Dr. Prem Kumar. Your vision and commitment have shaped this work to what it is today. And it's a beautiful work that has come. Now, the poetry in this book, and I'm sure that Ishmeet and Shweta will have more to say, but I feel it's both rooted and restless. If you read the poems, you find they are rooted all right, but they're restless. They are grounded in memory, in history, and lived experience. They're alive. The question, they transform. You look at the title itself, Earth and Embers. It captures this duality, the earth that holds and nurtures and remembers, and the embers that burn, resist, but helps you to reimagine. It's a very apt title, and we thought that this was very right, because before arriving at this title, we explored several possibilities. Again, both Ishmeet and Shweta were a part of it, because I'm very bad with titles. They came up with quicksand borders, South Asia and verse, and then vibrant and volatile South Asia and verse amongst them. There were some of the options that we had, until we found a name that truly resonated with the spirit of the collection, and that is why we have Earth and Embers today. Now, at one stage, we had actually completed the manuscript, contacted a publisher, sent it to them, waited for a year, and then they requested copyright permission. And getting 64 copyright permissions is no joke, but all of our contributors did send it. And a year later, a year and a half later, they recommended significant changes. Changes we could have agreed. If there was a lot of editing to be done, we could have agreed. But then they asked us to cut, alter, even rewrite certain poems. I remember seeing a page where a whole poem was rewritten by the reviewer, and that really got my blood boiling. Okay, sometimes citing political reasons. Yeah, we live during a very political times, all right, but then that is no way to approach anything. And we got into a discussion, and Ishmeet and Shweta, no, yeah, we chose to stand our ground. It cost us 3 years. And there were times when, I had told Ishmeet and Shweta, no, we'll give it up, because it was becoming so difficult. Then, no, these two girls, I told you, they're very gutsy. They said, no, we will persist. And undeterred, we began again. So today, if you see this book in front of you, it is, I think the task of searching for an editor was largely Ishmeet's contact with Speaking Tigers. And Shweta also was there, giving suggestions, helping out. I don't know, we must have woke her up at all times of the day, but she was there. And both of you have done a very marvelous work. And today, if you see this book, we connected with Speaking Tiger through Ishmeet, and the rest, they say, is history. I'm sure that one day, maybe nobody will know the struggle behind this book, but then we know what we went through. And when we were going through this, we contacted our contributors, and we told them that this was the case. Most of them were very patient, but I'm sure that I would like to bring here a few of the comments that I got from some contributors. I'm not reading all of them, but then we have received deeply encouraging words from them. I would especially like to mention K. Sachidanand sir, whose words continue to resonate with us. He said, "Thank you for being uncompromising. In these times, that is far more important than making compromises to get published." Yeah, we know that we have not compromised, and we have a beautiful collection today. But also like to acknowledge Pankuri Sinha, who said, "Thank you for standing up for everyone." Smita Bhaumik, who said, "Thank you for your conviction, courage, and steadfast support of poets." Shafinur Shafin, who said, "Your commitment and dedication to maintaining integrity of the collection is marvelous." Yutsu Sharma, "We appreciate your courage." Kamalakar Bhatt salutes to your commitment. No, these are maybe, phrases, small words, but for us, it was a huge thing. And we went ahead. The collection is there in front of you. And if you read this, within these spaces, we encounter a wide spectrum of voices. Some are very intimate, political, quiet, and urgent. And South Asia here, as you see, is not a monolith. We cannot look at it as a monolith at all. It is plural, complex, and deeply interconnected. Everything that you see, it's so deeply connected. And the poem actually traverses borders, whether it is geographical, linguistic, and emotional. And it invites us to uh, reflect on a sense of belonging, identity, gender, conflict, and hope. And it's a huge thing. When you look at those 364 pages, I'm sure that Shweta must have gone through it to pick up each and every thread. And yeah, all of you will come to know what this book is about. And this curation actually that we did does not impose a singular narrative. You can't have one. It allows multiplicity, voices that coexist, converse, and at times they challenge one another also. So, what makes Earth and Embers particularly significant is its ability to hold both tenderness and fire. It speaks of wounds, but also of healing, of silence, but also of articulation. It reminds us that poetry remains one of the most powerful ways to witness, to remember, and to imagine otherwise. I'm sure that there are many collections that have come out reminding us that this is true of poetry. And as we gather here, whether it is on Zoom or on live stream, we participate in that act of collective witnessing. It's very essential today when Dr. Sonia was talking in terms of opposition, isn't it? Maybe this is one of the first steps. You collectively witness first. This launch is not just about presenting a book, it is about opening a space for dialogue, reflection, and connection. And I invite you all to engage with the poem, not just as readers, but as listeners, to hear the echoes of histories, the pulse of contemporary realities, and the quiet insistence of hope that run through this collection. Just as an example, I would like to read, Dr. Sachidanandan Sir's poem, Song from the Ruins. This is a translated one, and this is on page 304 of the collection. I want to read this because we got a message from Sachidanand Sir that he won't be able to attend this since he was going through a bad patch. He's one of our most senior most contributors, a wonderful person, and a celebrated writer. So I thought I'll just read one of his poems, slightly, longer poem, but then I think it's apt for these times, these troubled times, what he has to say. This is a translated poem. It's called Song from the Ruins. So, Sonia, is it okay? We go ahead with this poem? Right. So the original is Malayalam, translated by the poet himself, and it goes like this. I stand on these ruins with my weary steps, like in Harappa or in Hampi. Once this was a nation, a continent built in salt and sweat, a flower raised by blood, a conch risen from the sea, a map of many colors drawn in tears, extending from the Himalayas to the Arabian Sea. Now I see the festival of the people turn into a funeral procession in black and triumphal chants into laments. One tale for each murder, one battle for each memory, one more partition in every heart. There was a time when we treated even our conquerors like guests. They turned our land into a rainbow, left in our treasury lifestyles, languages, arts, cultures. But those who chose to play the colonizer, we fought as one person. We won freedom despite your betrayal. We created a nation where no faith was alien, no tongue foreign. Even in the darkness of the dispossessed flickered the fragrant moonlight of hope. The moment you raised your banner of hate and greed, people's flag became a rag, and their anthem an elegy. You came with another history, with another geography and arithmetic. You robbed us of our woods and lands for your masters, scared the downtrodden, shaking your weapons. You feared those who tell the truth, extended poison vials to those on the brink of suicide, let loose the demons of the netherworld on earth. We were a nation, but now we are dust. Even in this dust are the cries of the imprisoned stones, the songs of the survivors, bleeding memories rising from the dead on the gravestone's grass, letters blossoming on the violence ascending the cloud, pale angels flying to the sky from the waste heaps, the white horses of untamed desire, pigeons, pigeons. We will come back. From the empty barns dreaming of the sun, even in winter, from the odors of piss and pollen in the alleys, from the joy that fills breasts, oranges and poems, from the turbid pools of remembrance, From the days that enter the fishermen's cottages like rain-drenched dogs, from the flying brooms, from the clothes of miners stained with oil and coal, from the pictures of wild goddesses drawn in the tribal hamlet with the quills of quails, from the brave memories cascaded in language, from the unpolished words carried by the pariah's wounds, from the trampled plant of the night with its golden leaves, from roots. We will raise a new nation of compassion and sisterhood that laughs without hate, a nation without walls and borders, without the rich and the poor, its head held high and its arms open to all, here on this soil of dried up rivers and airless forests, where evening stars fall like magnolias, we lay 7 stones. I felt that this was a very powerful, poem which resonates with our times. So that was uh, Satchidanand sir's. I don't know whether we have time to read one more.
Sure, no problem.
Yeah, okay, then I'll be reading, though it's with a lot of hesitation because I don't want to showcase what I write, but I'm going to read what I have written because this in turn resonates with what Sachidanand sir has been writing uh, about. So this is titled Purushottama's Side, and it is on 208, page 208. Okay, the irony, or maybe I don't know what to call it, is me as an outsider writing about the majority. Okay, so let's see how this goes. So it's Purushottama side. This is not what I visualized in my Rashtra, O men. In my kingdom, peace reigns and love resides. Trust is the bedrock on which I build bridges across hearts and minds. What is this I see? Copse and heaps? If it is for the cow, then it is also for the faith they follow. Are these not my praja? O mere mortals, why this hypocrisy? You fell a place of worship to build another to worship me. You mark and kill. Hasn't history taught you anything, mere mortal? The times of Christ when the Jews were marked, and then again with Hitler? And history's testimony to what unfolded. Your education is futile. You who see difference in being human, you who cannot be but inhuman. How is it so in my Rajya? You cannot create a Rashtra on the corpses you fell and the bones on the pyre or the burial remains. You cannot win by hate and division. The souls of the bodies floating on the Ganga and the Yamuna wait for salvation. How do you account for that feat, human? And the ominous silence from your throat. Your praja will remember when time comes and the world will no longer be Maya. So that's a short poem. So that is what I had written. So I think these are just two samples of what is there in this collection. I'm sure there are many, many more, and I leave it for you to read and go through it. So I invite all of you as listeners, as active listeners, writers, to go through this volume and let us know what you feel. Thank you, Sonia. Over on to my other editors.
Maybe Shweta could go on first, then I'll take up.
So, Ishmeet, I thought you have a train to catch, but I'm glad we don't have to rush immediately. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for everything that Rachel ma'am says. And every time, I have people in my life, and I'm very grateful to that, who call me these girls, these young people, and I kind of smile. I like that. Thank you. But I still remember the time that Rachel ma'am talked about, the time when we were all enclosed. And I must always talk about the privilege that we were in, that we could sort of look into our writing, go to social media to get connected. And when I look at it today, like in 4 to 5 years, social media is no longer probably a space which connects more. It has become a space that fractures and disconnect. I just see that how soon things that we hold on to can be taken away from us. But I hope we still can salvage that space, and we doing this and Samyukta, live casting it, Facebook casting it is one of those little ways we can reclaim. Poetry is another way we can reclaim the space of social media, maybe. So that being said, I am so grateful for the journey of Earth and Embers. And now that, Sonia started with it, that, how apt the title is, I was thinking that was it some sort of a foreboding? Maybe we should have called it, I don't know, beds of roses or blooming flowers to maybe change and rewrite our reality if it had any change, if it could make any changes, as it were. So one thing while we were putting this collection together. So one thing anyone may want to know is that what is this collection about? What is this anthology about? And there are many amazing anthologies which dedicate to a theme, a style, maybe a form. And we were, I believe, on one page. To say that it isn't about anything but the fact that there are people who write poetry, people who, as Sonia absolutely beautifully put, people with experience, people who've just come about or in the process of finding their voices. So we have all sorts of people in different stages of their life and writing careers writing. One commonality is the geography, and not just the physical geography but also the imagined geography of people connected to South Asia. So I think that was it. And if I were to talk about running themes, what do I even say? If you were to explain what is India about, what is Pakistan about, what is Bangladesh about, what is Sri Lanka about, what is Tibet about, what are all these places really about? What kind of dreams do we dream? What kind of lives do we aspire? Do we mourn differently than the rest of the world? Do we? So some of these things are so deeply human. If I may say, so deeply South Asian. But then, what is it to be South Asian? So I don't know if I have answers. We've read and reread many of these poems, and I could say yes, there are certain themes that draw us, South Asians closer to certain things. Seasons, right? Like how deeply we are entrenched by the seasons that affect us. The fact that we have such deep inner lives, even though our continent is overcrowded, teeming with people, teeming with multitudes. So I see the play between inner life and outside life, that play out a lot in many poems. Our mythology is something which ground us into our writing. So many, like from Ashwini Kumar to, I think Malti is here, so she has, so many of these poems sort of draw from that sort of, our mythology itself. And some of us are into form. For instance, Kamlakar Bhatt, if not here, but, he's the kind of person who looks at forms very strongly. Places and spaces. We have Azia Atharzia, who speaks about Kashmir she has lost. It's a poem. Those poems are poems of love, but also of mourning, of the space that cannot be reclaimed. Other kind of people who look at it like travelers, right? They are reveling in those spaces. Indra Namirta Nayagam, a poet who in his childhood had to leave Sri Lanka. He was a Tamil person, and then he grew up in the UK and now had a very great career as a diplomat and a poet. Talks about the house he lost in Sri Lanka. So the house he grows up and then he revisits it. The house exists but in a different form. So do you re-enter that home? Is that even a possibility? So these are the poem that houses a poem, by Rohini Kejriwal about her unborn child. Poem by Temsula Ao. So I remember our correspondence, and sadly, before the book could take form, she passed away. That poem, where she's almost atop of a hill, and talking in some way a farewell to her probably fellow poets. So that, or another poem that I plan to read is Kamlakar Bhatt's Ant. So if there's a perspective from above the hill, there is almost the ground level where the what does the ant do when it is crushed between books? So what is a South Asian perspective? I would just say it's as multi-layered, as multitude than as people, as our dreams. And I would now maybe start reading one of the poems. As I said, first I want to begin with Temsula Au's poem. She calls it "Forgive Me." It's page 276. And I'll give a moment for Sonia to link it up. Forgive me. I begin with a prayer, dear fellow poets, and say, forgive me, for I do not know your tongue and can speak to you only in this borrowed one. And that's another refrain, right? English as a language which joins us, which is neither yours nor mine. Mine grew out of stones, lived in forests, and traveled through high winds, flourished on hilltops and nestled in cottages, clinging to rugged cliff sides. Thus my tongue lived, rough, glottal, terse, maybe nonsensical to others, but it carried the meaning of love and peace, and at times the fire of hatred and war too. But it also sang songs to the moon and laments to the settling sun over the grave sides of lovers and heroes. Today, our youth struggle with the twists of the archaic sounds and seek refuge in the alleys of cyberspace and substitute native terms with abstract jargon of the alien web that mutate them further into speechlessness before the ancient tongue of elders. Today I am an elder, but no better, as I too flounder in the babble of different kind, where I see no light in the day and find only red flames in the night. My heart trembles with fright, and my eyes brim with tears for not finding the right tones to speak to my soul. The soul which still resides in the distant hills, among the forest of raging winds. This wandering soul looking, still looking for the lost trail from where precious words came home to roost on our hills and gave me my name. So she said this, she read in 2014 in an international poetry festival. Anyways, we miss her and tribute to her and what she stood for. So there are so many shouts out. I mean, I could pull out any poem from the collection and hold it to light, and I think it's gonna shine its insight on us on any day. So I invite you all to take up the kind of poems you know and you admire, but also the poems you don't know, poets you don't know. But I believe by the end of reading the collection, you feel that there is a connection that you've built. So that being said, with a lot of deliberation, I pick out another poem, but this one is mine. This is in page number 242. It's called His Shirt, Blue Red Checked. Now, so while compiling this work, we were all like going through a time of loss and mourning. Just the stories of people who are here today and who are not anywhere to be found tomorrow. That's the kind of narratives we were around. It was a collective suffering. So many of us wrote poems that make us, make sense of the world around us. And this poem came out from that. His shirt, blue red checked, still hangs on the peg of the bedroom door. A hint of old spice and sweat still haunts his vast expanse. His life boys of soap, still a mess. How many times would he wash his hands? The fish is in the fridge, though he had marinated it in red chili paste. He never got to taste. His pillow has hair, some gray, some black, and the intent of his head on the foam that has memory. He shall not watch the sequel of the movie we had been waiting for. It is funny how he could always guess the plot mysteries, the suspense, but he could not portend his own exit in the end. And I know we wanted to read two poems, but I am asking for time, my timekeeper, for another poem, if that's allowed. So I wanted to talk a bit about form, and Kala Ramesh is another name I wanted to shout out to for giving, like, blessing our collection with her haiku and haiboons. Yet another thing which I want to talk about is the fact that when we asked around, there was a this is a particular privilege some people have in their lives, and thanks to Rachel ma'am that I got this. I was scouting for poetry. That was like my job title for many months. I was scouting for poems, searching for poet, writing to poets, and most of these interactions I was always blessed with a poetry or two. In the email, Sonia, you were one of them. Some of them, by the way, would send me their entire collection, like PDF of their entire book, and say, choose to choose any you like. And that was a challenge I didn't dislike, but that also meant that we would read through a lot of poems and pick. So if these are not your best verses, I'm sorry. We also wear the kind of lenses that we do, and we choose what we chose. So okay, so my final poem for the day, An Ant by Kamlakar Bhatt, and this is 133. An ant an ant got caught inside a book. It went around the lines of shapely alphabets to find a way out, but only felt spent, failing to find an exit from the book. It fell asleep there. How much space would a speck sized ant need? It woke up with hunger blaze. What can an ant, no more than a sugar crystal, do to beat its hunger? It began to lick the stray letters from the row of lines here and there, killing its hunger pangs bit by bit. Thus, this little small ant had eaten up many parts of words, breaking the link between word forming letters. How strong a tiny, hungry mouth can be. It had wrought royal confusion in a profound text. With this, I thank you all for your generosity, your poetry, and your listening right now. Thank you.
I'll take up from here. And when you're the last speaker, it's very difficult to say something because a lot has already been said. But nevertheless, this is like such a huge volume that you always have something to say. I also want to first begin by thanking Preeti Gill because Preeti was a very important force in getting us a publisher, and she had realized what we were going through. And since we're going to have series of, some of these talks, we will get her on board on one of, so every time we faltered, right? So the best thing about co-editing is that when one loses hope, the other one pushes, no, we'll do it. We'll take it forward, right? So this was happening with us. So if ma'am at times said that, all right, we are done with it. So either Shweta or I would say, no, we'll take it forward, ma'am. We'll do something. And if I was like, not doing anything, then Shweta would call up and say, all right, like, let's take it forward. Let's, conclude what we started. Right? Let's have a finishing line for this. So this ways, we were kind of encouraging each other, and we were also filling up spaces for each other's absences. So if I am not contributing, Shweta would pitch in, ma'am would pitch in. And, we did realize, so there were times when, we were also going through our pressure points. And I think it has been a very beautiful journey where there was a lot of understanding, lot of sharing, right? And a lot of, making space for each other. So that also goes in the making of this book. And I'm very grateful for, and I also feel blessed to have these people in my life, and of course, Prem. I wish he could switch on his camera and we could see him because we've not met him, but he's always been present. Um, uh, I would here, also talk about the whole idea of, the question of South Asia. So we started with collecting, poems um, from South Asia. But then in the making of the book, I think I could go back and revisit this whole question of region, right? And to look at, what South Asia as a family was actually offering. And then you come to a point, by the time this book is made, you come to a point where South Asia does not remain South Asia alone, actually becomes global, right? And these boundaries get blurred. And so this was also happening through translations, because we also have a section on translations. And so there were people writing in different languages, and South Asia has multiple languages, right? So you were not only writing in English, but we were collecting in English. So a lot of people wrote in, their regional languages, and then these poems were either translated by them or by, others. Now, what translation did here was it bridged the gap between languages, and it brought languages together. And in doing so, it also brought people together. And so what we realized is that, this collection came out where, South Asia emerged as a family, and because we all shared experiences, and socially we are almost the same, right? So therefore we call ourselves as a South Asian family. But then this shared experience also transcends the world, and it leads to, something which is truly global, right? Because towards the end, we also realize that, it's the human that is the central. And it's us who has divided the earth into South Asia or Middle East or East or West. So somebody's East is somebody else's West, and somebody's West is somebody else's East. And so they actually, the world is round, right? And the world is one. So, so how do we look at world? And there is one world, right? So these divisions are something which we have created. But once you hold this in your hand, you basically cannot find those dividing lines. So it actually comes together, right? And it's like we look at world as one. Even though socially we relate to South Asia, but it totally transcends those boundaries, because language of love is universal, right? Pain is universal. And how do we kind of fit these experiences into regions? And today, when we look at the world, which is going through war, right? How do we kind of look at this world? So it doesn't mean that if I'm in India, I'm not impacted by war. I'm equally impacted by war as, people in Gaza are, or Iran are, or anywhere in the world wherever there is war. And how do we look at, these boundaries? And interestingly, I'm also going to explain this through by reading a poem. So interestingly, many of these poems transcended, these boundaries. And COVID was also a period, where simultaneously there was a huge farmers movement, right? And I'm going to read a poem by Mahmood Awan, who's a Pakistani poet, and he's writing about farmers of Punjab, but he's writing about farmers of Pakistani Punjab, and how those lines get blurred, and it becomes so relevant to somehow even the farmers movement in India, right? This poem is on page number 322, and it is called An Ode to Farmers. It was originally in Punjabi. It was translated by Mushtaq Sufi. Right. Sonia, should I read, or should I wait for you to? All right. So this is called An Ode to Farmers. Granddad always said, selling farmland is like selling your kin. Smell of the freshly grown wheat is not for sale. Who can pay for the bells ringing in our plowing bulls' necks? Swag of the barley fields can't be restrained. In a land where lyricism of the Punjabi folk songs is diesel of the singing tractors, Grandad always said, Punjab is martyrdom. Its voice is of the voiceless. It grinds dark egos of the high castles down. Punjab is sainthood that rose from the holy hearts of the tillers. I remember Granddad saying, own your roots, son, never get swayed by the trading eyes of the tummy full greed. Your land is your mother, your herd, your honor. Those who insulted them died begging on the streets of Delhi. And this is here we actually see, how uh, Punjab comes back to the undivided Punjab, right? There's this feeling of oneness. And this is, available not just in uh, these poems, right? In this particular set of poems, but many other poems, and particularly, poems which came in translation, we do find that flavor of the original language as well. And so they were, and there's also something very funny. So we had Afghanistani tenants, and since we were doing this volume and we wanted to have some Afghani poets, and I was just sitting and having tea with them, and suddenly, I asked them, "Do you know of any poet?" And they're like, what are you going to do with an Afghani poet? You don't even know Persian, Pashto, you can't even read it. So I said, but do you know somebody? And they did put me in touch with, very famous Afghani poets. And I'm going to read a poem of Pir Muhammad Karwan. And interestingly, the process of translation was amazingly interesting because these people whom I was talking to had never thought of translating these books. And, they were poets at heart, but they had never translated these poems. And that is when, we do have one of the poems which was translated by one of the tenants, right? He did it there and he shared that poem with us. And then we started digging further. So from one poet, we got a contact of another poet, and then from that poet to another poet. And then we did get some poems which the poets themselves got translated and they sent it to us. And this one is a very beautiful one. This is on page number 353. Flowers and Man by Pir Muhammad Karwan. And it was originally written in Pashto and it has been translated by Daud Azami. Flowers feed on earth and ashes. Some clear, but mostly murky water. Yet they are wholly beautiful, fragrant. Their colors delight both eyes and hearts. While man, before whom angels once bowed down, looks on flowers, drinks water purer than tears, and crunches deep red apples, yet turns ugly. Why? Flower and bud. Flower food is soil, ash, and red, slightly clear and very turbid water. It is still holy, beautiful, full of grace. Eyes and hearts are filled with sweetness. It is full of colors, but I am the one who has been blessed by angels. He looks at the flowers and drinks the clear water until he is full of tears. Remove the peel from the red apples. I wonder why this is so ugly. So this is, the flavor that you get from the place it comes from. The period was absolutely troubling because we were going through a lot. COVID was biowar. We can still feel the impact of COVID today. And then, came up the Ukraine-Russia war. And again, followed by, of course, Palestine-Gaza conflict, and also now by, the Iran war. So what basically happened was that we had written an introduction, and by the time the book came to publication, we realized that, this had been a period of turmoil and a lot had happened, right? So the gap between when we wrote the introduction and when the book was to be published, that was also immense. And surprisingly, it was turbulent. And it had moved on at a great, great pace. So we needed to address that. And therefore, we revised our introduction and we went back. And then, as I was editing, with the copyright editor, I went through the poems again. And I realized that poetry as a medium, is of all times. So if we were trying to look at old poems or new poems, there was nothing like that. These were all timeless, and what was happening now was already addressed in the poems. And I think that is the beauty of this volume, right? I have been quite troubled with war, particularly children, and the night, this news came that by morning, 14,000 children are going to die because of starvation in Gaza, right? I got very emotional. I'm still very emotional. I have gooseflesh the moment I say that. It was not acceptable. And that's when some of these poems around war and children came up, and we included them in this volume. And so I'm going to read this very small one, which is on page 102. And this is called When Children Starve. Just wait for Sonia to present it. So this is called When Children Starve. It is not about who is right or wrong. When children starve to death, an apple rotting in the heat of explosives, death of humanity, the whole world fails. No one wins the war. I did not even have words to, write a longer poem on this, and words had failed me. But I think metaphor explained what I was going through. Again, we talked about social media, and we've been in this world of social media. So there's one poem, this is page number 101. And this is called Social Media.
Could I have the page number again, please?
101. Just above this poem that I read. Debates, opinions, judgments, accusations. Photos scream silently, louder than the sound of explosives. A blood-stained body of an infant half buried in the debris. A girl, all alone, watching out of a broken window from a dilapidated flat, still holding her teddy bear. A small boy holding his infant brother, wiping his tears. A malnourished child reduced to a skeleton. A father embracing his dead child smeared in blood. A mother living dead. The videos on the social media have no songs in the background, only rescue workers and the deceased. No sounds of birds, only bomb shelling. No laughter, only yelling. No life, but the death of humanity. So this is, what we were trying to do. This is where we are. We are also very grateful to each one of you for your contribution and for the patience you kept. Out of all the contributors, only one, retrieved her poems. And so, this collective consciousness that the poets have towards nation, towards humanity, towards the world, is what brings hope and what allows us to think that finally we will all survive these times. I'd like to thank this.
So, thank you, dear editors, for talking to us about your vision with regard to Earth and Embers. And there's a comment from Sutanuka Ghosh Roy on Facebook, who says it is a wonderful anthology and that she enjoyed it a lot while going through it. And in our chat box, Kamlakar Bhatt, one of our contributors and translators, he says, "Hi everyone, an excellent launch of a unique anthology." And he thanks the editors for their insight. Mr. Jay Srinivasa Rao would also like to thank Rachel Chechi and he says it's very nice to hear and see you speak of the coming together of the Earth and Embers, and the poems you read were apt. He thanks Shweta and Ishmeet for your different insights into the making of this anthology, and that he says the poems that you read are timely, especially how the Afghani poem came about. So thank you, and that he's happy to be here with all of you. So, by way of conclusion, I would like to mention that, right now we are passing through an extreme heat wave all over the country, and Kerala is just as susceptible. But as the session began, there has been a distant sound of thunder. We've had this rumbling, and I thought that is the indication of times that are coming. It made me think of T.S. Eliot's "What the Thunder Said." So your verses are extremely cathartic. The process and the purity of the purpose also was extremely heartening to listen to. And I would say that it is only with such truth of purpose that an anthology of this kind can materialize. So I would like to tell you, dear editors, that I'm sure that the kind of sense of fulfillment that you feel would be unmatched. But I also know that I can see it in your faces. I can see it in your words that you have actually lived this anthology. And considering that, I hope that this is only the first of many such efforts on your part, because I think you work very well together. So, and that sense of cooperation will kind of fuel and further the dreams and the words of poets like everybody in this anthology. And it will also leave an impact on the readers. I would like to mention to everybody here who will be listening and catching up with the recordings that this is a very meticulously planned anthology. There are detailed introductions to the poets, there. And it's only then that the poems begin. So you have, purpose, you have context, you have an introduction. There is no one, who is felt or left unseen or unheard. That kind of a thing is not there. Everybody has their space. And I think that is one of the guiding principles of South Asia as well. The idea of the Vasudeva Kudumbakam, which has been often misused, misrepresented, and sprinkled everywhere like salt. But I think in this case, I think you really have brought that sense of universality and sense of collegiality into your collection. So this collection speaks of conflict. It speaks of partitions. It speaks of, I would say, a great deal of political, social, economic, and cultural disruptions. But it also talks about, how these things should be recorded. They should be sung about, and, how anthologies like these can serve as the bards of the future, lest we forget or lest it all gets buried under the hilltop of misinformation, or people try to alter history as and when and where and however it is that they please. So I think that in that sense of the term, this is a fundamental document of those kind of histories that should remain. Now, at Samyukta, we have a tradition. We do not say goodbye. So I'm going to leave it to the three editors in this order mentioned in the book upwards: Shweta, Ishmeet, and finally Rachel ma'am. You can read either a poem or a part of it. And when Rachel ma'am says, that's it, we will end the meeting. We will not say goodbye. Okay. So you'll have to announce your page numbers. I can see you scrambling for the book.
Yeah,
Okay.
one small announcement before we begin reading.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, please.
So we are very open to a lot of a series of talks, and Sonia has all very gratefully, very kindly agreed to do a couple of them for us. So this is the first one where we were speaking, but in the next series of talks, we would really appreciate our contributors to come forward and read their poems and talk about their experience of writing. So please feel free to volunteer, and we would be coming up again, collecting and sharing this experience of poetry writing, poetry reading. We're also open to traveling. Whenever Shweta can join us, yes, but because Shweta is not in India, but Bari ma'am and Rachel Bari ma'am and I am open to traveling. So whoever wishes to have a offline poetry reading session, and if you can arrange for it, we would be very happy to come and have book talks even offline, right? So please let us know. Thank you.
We'd be more than happy to host your subsequent sessions. And even if you're having an in-person meet, if somebody can, live stream it, we'll be willing to, screen it on Facebook. Ma'am, you had anything to say, Farah Ghaznavi?
Yes, I would just like to share something very personal. We've talked a lot about COVID, and I am very new to poetry, I have to admit. So it was a great joy for me to have my poem selected for this anthology. And to be honest, I was very proud of all of the editors for standing by their principles and our shared principles, but I was not sure if this book would ever come to pass. And my father loved poetry, was passionate. We have floor to ceiling bookshelves full of poetry from all over the world, South America, T.S. Eliot, as someone mentioned. And his great sorrow was that for most of my youth, I refused to indulge in his love of poetry with him. I was primarily a short story writer when I started, and I'm still primarily a short story writer. But that period of COVID, I think someone talked about this, and I felt very much that one of the reasons I began to love poetry as much as I do now is because it's a distillation of emotion, and particularly of grief, I think. And I knew at that time both my parents were unwell. I was looking after them. I knew I would lose them, and I did. But in that and that is when the only time I had to myself was to write these little fragments. And a poet friend of mine said, "Oh my God, you're writing poetry, Farah." So anyway, that's what gave me the courage to send it to you. But what I really, really want to thank you for so profoundly is when you accepted the poem years ago, my father was still alive. And one afternoon we were sitting there and I read him some fragments and he said, "Oh, this is not bad. Who is this guy?" So I told him. And he said, "But you don't write poetry." I said, "Apparently now I do." And then I told him, I was able to tell him that my first poem will be published, Papa, in this collection by these three editors. And he was so thrilled. And he never got to see the book, but I'm so grateful to you for allowing me to tell him that. Thank you.
Great.
Bless you, Farah ma'am, and bless you three as well. See the kind of, synergy, the kind of things that you have made possible. Thank you very much. Uh, in fact, at various times, the anthology was so long in the making that at some points I had forgotten, whether I had sent it or not sent it. And then occasionally there would be a mail and I'd be like, okay, it's there and I am not withdrawing it. I am going to keep it there because in my mind, it belonged to you. That was it.
Thank you.
Oh my.
Now we'll go ahead with the readings. So like I mentioned, we will start with Shweta, and
Yeah.
we'll just make it a chain. Okay, so but
Okay.
please,
Do you want us to read the whole poem,
that's
or
entirely up to you. You can
okay?
read a segment of it, that's also
Okay.
fine. But you just have to say over to you, so and so.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay.
And then Rachel ma'am has to say thank you, or that's it, or something like that. Okay.
Okay, great. House for Lola by Indran Amirtanayagam. This is part of your inheritance in
Page no, I'm
Ceylon.
sorry, page number,
I'm
please.
sorry, 83.
Go ahead.
Yeah. House for Lola. This is part of your inheritance. In Ceylon, I would call it dowry. In this country of migration, a right, a bond, a home. I feel at times like Lear. I want to rewrite that tragedy. Celebrate Cordelia, where she says that she loves, according to my bond and my station. This poem is no more and no less than a sum of my love for you, my daughter. Take it. Let me stand with you where I can and for as long as God determines. Over to you, Rachel, ma'am. Sorry, over to you, Ishmeet. So, yeah.
Okay. I'm going to read Swati Pal's poem, Being and Becoming to Nothingness, page 265. Between being and nothingness stands time, ticking away, one moment of sun, the other a tsunami, an instant of laughter, the next just pain, a whiff of fragrance, the stench of despair. I wish with all my being of nothingness. Over to you, ma'am.
With Farah Gosnavi's permission, I would like to read your own poem. Or would you like to read yours? Now, this is Bedtime Stories for Girls Who Know Too Much. I'm going to read the entire poem. It's not very long, but it's really admirable. Reaching across the hungry darkness of
Ma'am,
my
page
room.
number, please.
Page number 64, 65. Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Bedtime Stories for Girls Who Know Too Much. Reaching across the hungry darkness of my room, the distant night light shines on the toy dog. By my side on the bed, he sits, alert, upright, ready for any danger. I remind myself he will put up a fight. The weak beam sparks an answering glint in my teddy's eyes, and I feel a little braver to realize that he too waits, vigilant against surprise. My oldest protector, when the time comes, ready to rise. The stuffed monkey at my feet is the weakest link, too small to be useful. I cannot help think against such epic odds. They watch over me, they silent sentries, so that the shadows may not hide the monsters that crowd in from every side when a girl lets down her guard. I'm too old now, Mama says, to fear things which lurk in the light of my anxious days, hiding from my searching gaze, waiting for the darkness to fall. For I have seen the face of a real monster, and he laughs at the night. I cannot tell her that he wears a disguise all the time, living in plain sight, dancing through the corridors of her house, unafraid of daylight. Ripe, oozing with guile and charm, that man never needs to hide. Like a fairy tale monster under my bed, I wait, helpless, for him to pounce at will. He has kept me prisoner, captured by dread. Unable to speak, to scream, to cry out for help, I whisper, despairing, he watches me so. Nobody can save me. No one heard what I said. And from the first time that he touched me, shivering, mute in terror, now and forever, he lives inside my head.
Oh.
That was a great day, great poem. Hope to meet again